Today, something special has landed on the bar. After a short amount of time teasing it on their Instagram, Option O dropped a new grinder. And this one is, for all intents and purposes, the spiritual successor to the P64, which for those of you who have watched the channel for some time now, probably know that that's kind of been one of my all-time favorite grinders. Now, they reached out to me and they said, hey, do you want to give the P80 a go? And of course, I had to say yes. As always, though, there was no agreement on, giving them a positive review or anything like that, but they did ask me to post some videos, and so here we go. I figured I'd throw together just a quick unboxing and first impressions on this new grinder that I would call highly anticipated, except for we really didn't know it was coming until just a couple weeks ago. As we crack open the box, you can see the nice silhouette art of the P80, as well as the classic packet that has some black and white Option O stickers and a bonus Allen key, which I assume is for taking the grinder apart when and if the need should arise. These stickers, of course, have seen better days, but of course they're just going to go directly into my collection. Now, removing the foam, you can get a quick glimpse at the body of the grinder, but first let's crack open a couple of the small boxes. And this first box, a little present inside, it contains the all-metal dosing funnel for a 58mm portafilter, if that's your chosen grind vessel, I guess I should say. But it's nice, it's metal, it feels very nicely machined, it's got a nice weight to it, and it has some magnets. All in all, nothing crazy, but it's a nice piece to have. Next up on the other box, this one I kind of figured it would be the dosing cup. So cracking this one open, and it looks like inside the box you've also got the stickers that you use to set the zero. These were already pre-installed on my P64 when I got it, never used them, whatever. But the cup itself has been redesigned since the last iteration of the P64 I have, which is a little bit more squat, a little shorter, but it does feel really nice, has a really nice sort of angle. Generally, much like all the other Option O bits, metal, feels well machined and sturdy. All right, now let's take the grinder out of the box. Now, first thing I noticed, at least compared to P64, is this thing has just a bit more heft to it. I'd have to look up the actual numbers, but based on my recollection of the P64 anyway, it feels heavier. All right, so the moment we've all been waiting for. Of course, it doesn't look all that different from the P64, which is why I said it's the spiritual successor, but I do like the look of the P64, so I automatically like the look of this one. There's not much difference here. So, of course, in the classic unboxing experience, we've got to remove the stickers. This one's a little tighter and slightly unfortunate, leaving some residue behind, but that's nothing a little nail polish remover can't handle. The top on this one, unlike the P64 that I have, slides out kind of like their other newer grinders. And inside you have the little notch that holds the knocker. And this piece, I think, is supposed to block it from going past the 0 point, which can be removed if you want. Now, of course, we're going to take out our trusty little Allen key and try to get inside and take a look at the Burrs. All right, so at first glance, they're blind burrs, they're 80mm in diameter, and they definitely have a very unique looking geometry to them. But one thing that stands out is this centerpiece, which I think is designed to work more so like an auger of a horizontal burr grinder, where it feeds the beans in, maybe reduces regrinding, maybe helps with particle distribution, maybe helps with avoiding some kind of jamming or clogging in the burr chamber. But as you can see, these burrs, as I mentioned, they're pretty unique in terms of their look. They're Meissen burrs, which is Option O's in-house naming designation or brand. But all in all, they look very interesting, so I'm really curious to see how they perform. And since I mentioned that they are 80mm, here's what they look like with a 64mm set sitting on top. There is a significant expansion of the grinding surface area. One thing I notice generally taking apart, putting it back together, is everything fits together just very nicely. The machining and design on this is what you'd expect from option O. Now, since the grinds obviously are stepless, but the speed of the grinder isn't. So you can actually hear the motor pick up as you step from each speed from 300 all the way up to 1700 RPM from the side switch. And outside of the power button itself, this top button gives you a bit of a boost in terms of speed to purge, as well as an auto stop. But since we've kind of looked at all the bits and pieces more or less, let's give this thing its maiden voyage and brew some coffee. So first up, my favorite brew method, the one that I do the most. Let's make some espresso and see how it does. One thing I noticed is just much like the P64, the grinder is so quiet when it's running that I honestly think that the RPMs are lower than they actually are, but it actually grinds pretty quickly, even at like around 600 RPM. It's, pretty fast, and it might be having to do with the larger burrs. Maybe I'm used to the 64 millimeter, but it does feel very quick. And the grinds themselves are nice and fluffy. Just from a quick glance, we'll do some more deeper tests as we move into the full review. But the grinds themselves, no complaints. Everything seems very consistent and smooth. But when it comes to espresso and really any coffee related situation, looking at the grinds is one thing. Let's pull this shot and see what it looks like. Now this shot did sort of run a bit faster than maybe ideally, but this coffee has been rested for about 3 to 4 weeks, so it is really opened up. It's a honey process Ethiopia, so I'm kind of curious to see how it sort of pulls out that clarity that I was maybe used to from the P64, since I know option O mentioned these burrs are a good sort of all-around option. It smells great. There are notes of jasmine and peach, so let's see if those actually come across in the cup. Now, in terms of the first sip, I will say peach, the jasmine, it's all there. It's got a nice body, nice finish. All in all, pretty happy with it. It could be dialed in a little bit more, but let's also try some filter. So today we're using the Oria glass no bottom dripper, but this is one of my favorites with a nice even flow through the whole unit. We're going to grind on 4 from the espresso, which I think was around 1-ish, 1.5, 1.25, and see how it comes out. Now again, the grind's fast, the grinder is super quiet. There is, a little bit of usefulness in the knocker. I'm not convinced you don't need RDT or the Ross droplet technique, but we'll talk more about that, like I said, in the further final review of this unit. But now let's brew up this filter coffee and see how it comes out. In terms of the grinds for filter coffee, just again, looking at it, it does appear that there's, some chaff, there's some larger chunks, there's some smaller bits, there's some fines, which for me generally isn't ideal when it comes to filter coffee. I'm usually aiming for clarity over everything else, but they do mention that clarity is something they're aiming for with these burrs, so we'll see. Now, when it comes to this brew, I just did 12 grams of the same honey processed Ethiopia, and I did 192 grams of water, a small 35 gram bloom, 2 more pours, a swirl, and that's it. So nothing fancy, nothing crazy. I just want to get a general baseline of what these burrs can do on a filter. And now the moment of truth. It looks very crisp, very clean. So I'm curious to see how it comes across from the espresso, which also was surprisingly clear considering the general feeling of the burrs overall being a little bit more spread out in terms of their grind size or particle distribution. Now, based on what I tasted in the espresso, I will say that the filter coffee is pretty similar in terms of its overall balance. There isn't any sort of crazy acidity going on here, which I do tend to like more brightness and, like I said, clarity in my filter coffee, but it's not like it's a slouch. You know, you're still getting those subtle, nuanced flavors of jasmine, and, you know, you're getting the peach, and it's a classic sort of Ethiopian coffee vibe. I would like to see if I could take it a little bit more, maybe go a little lower in the RPM range and see if I can get just a much clearer cup. But those, again, as I said many times before, are going to be tests for another day. But at this point, I think it's time to start wrapping this one up. And as always, pass the conversation on to you. So what are your thoughts on the Lagom P80? Do you think it's going to be a good successor for the P64? Do you think it's going to be, you know, something that will take sales away from the P64, or is it like a whole different realm? I mean, price point wise, it's at like $1,500. So they're not super far off from each other. So curious to see how everyone sort of adopts the P80 into the world. Also considering the 80mm burrs aren't quite as common as 64. So let me know your thoughts on all those things and any other questions you might have, things you want to see in the final review coming in a couple months, and drop them in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications when new videos drop. Check out my Instagram at Sprometheus for more coffee content. Help support the channel by considering becoming a member for exclusive access. And as always, stay caffeinated. Pony Boy